Hi everyone, welcome to the Mental Health Warriors. I'm your host for today, Caroline Murphy-Bennis, the Rainbow Warrior, and we're talking about the emotions under addiction today. And we've got some amazing guests to talk about this topic. And I'll go around and introduce everyone to you first before we get into it. So we've got Steve Knapp, who's our mindset warrior. Say hello, Steve.
Hello, everybody.
And we have Kate May from the UK, who is a life coach who is actually helping people with addiction around alcohol. And welcome, Kate. Welcome, Kate. And we have Lisa Jane from Sydney, Australia, who's an emotional educator.
You guys have all got really strong accents.
And we have Grania O'Kane, who's kind of a bit blurry at the moment. We've got her voice, but we don't have her image today.
I'm working on my image in many different ways, but I'll try and put something up for this.
Brilliant. Well, Grania is a social scientist and a wellbeing educator from Ireland, and she's also got lots of experience with addiction, in the addiction services in Ireland. So, welcome everyone, and welcome everyone to all our listeners and whoever's watching from us all around. And so we're kind of curious to go a little bit deeper into addiction and see what lies underneath, the symptoms of addiction and the emotions that drive us maybe to feeling that we need to kind of use, a substance to make ourselves feel better. And like Steve, in your experience, like maybe to have just to share with people, like I suppose your relationship with addiction within your life and how that kind of turned up, and why you feel, what emotions were kind of pushing you in that direction, do you think?
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, I'm the king of addiction. Like, I've almost made sure that I've been addicted to absolutely everything over my whole life. Like, I know I spoke about it with Jason a couple of weeks ago, but alcohol was my big one early days that I was into from about 15 years old through, playing adult sports a bit young and just slipping into the culture. And I carried that with me for about at least 25 years, probably a bit longer. And then, I've been a smoker since I was 12. So there's another good addiction, but that one I haven't been able to break yet. Yeah. I've dabbled with gambling. The only thing I've never mucked around with is drugs. So that's the only thing I haven't been addicted to. But when it comes to the emotions, I know my depression and alcohol abuse just tied in beautifully together for years. And it just brought about a ton of shame, guilt, especially as a father. That like you want to be a role model, and the only thing you're modeling is really poor behavior and choices. Mm-hmm. And I've already seen it in my sons that are 19 and 17. I've seen a lot of similar traits to when I was young, and clearly they've picked up from being young men how you sort of live your life as a young adult man, and what's expected. And quite a few of their mates have been very similar. It's like, okay, now we're old enough, we've got to get on the beers and run amok. And I'm sort of trying to show them that that's led to a lot of my pitfalls and not achieving the level of success I would have liked earlier in life, because I was always dragging myself back and getting stuck in that vortex of, I think I'm coming out of it, but then I don't know. Nothing really had to trigger me for drinking. It was just a done thing, especially I know being a roof tiler, it was like you get one drop of rain on the windscreen and pub's open at 10, we're all in there. Right. And that could be 5 days a week if it rained. And
really? Okay.
Then you finish work and it's like, well, okay, job's done. Where's the nearest bottle shop? You got to get a beer, and then you get home and, well, I'm home now, have some more beers. And it just kept going and going and going. And then it didn't bother me for a long time. It was only getting a bit older that I went, I feel really crap. And it wasn't like a hangover pain. It was more of an emotional pain of that. This isn't what I want to be doing in my life. It doesn't feel right. It was, especially once I started working on myself and developing. I I was starting to see so many things about me that I didn't like, and the shadows were starting to become visible.
Okay.
And I was like, this is not working. And yeah, and I still, as I said the other week, when things got really tough early this year, I was starting to slip into some bad habits. But yeah, luckily now I'm in a space where I can recognise and have the awareness and drag out rather than getting sucked deeper. I can pull myself back out and float around the top a bit easier and come back to a better environment.
Yeah, that's amazing. Isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, but like it's so true. Same in Ireland here. Like the culture, I suppose, is a huge culture of drink culture. You know, the kind of way. And I suppose you just kind of get launched into it, and everybody's doing it, and you don't really think too much until, I suppose, it starts to show up maybe with your health or your relationships or your work or whatever, you know. And I think it's kind of something then that, you know, yeah, it's a decision, but it's very hard sometimes to break pattern like that in a culture that is so heavily orientated around that kind of social life is all revolving around drink, you know. Like it's difficult because then you're kind of isolated a bit then if you're kind of trying to do it differently or you're trying to cover it up. And you know, I always say like Ireland is probably one of the only countries where it's kind of antisocial not to drink. Like it's, you know, it's like the opposite, you know.
Like in Australia.
Yeah, well, I've never been to Australia, so I don't really know. But like, it sounds pretty similar, you know. But it's funny. It's changing a bit now, and I think actually the lockdowns and all that kind of has helped a lot because it's kind of put people. It's an opportunity to change the cultural habits, you know. But I do notice the younger generation now getting more into kind of fitness, and you know that's helping because it's giving young guys a chance to have a choice of what they can do together. You know, like it's not always going to be. It doesn't always have to be around drink because it's kind of camaraderie, isn't it? And it's trying to be a team, you know, like part of a kind of a gang kind of thing, you know. So you want to have that connection, but if it was around something that wasn't so kind of addictive, it might be better. Yeah. And Kate, how about yourself? Your you know, how do you feel? Like, what were the emotions behind what, you know, your life experience with alcoholism? I think you mentioned that's what you're focusing with your coaching.
Well, I think I was the sort of girl that couldn't wait to be old enough to drink. When I was growing up, I would see everybody having so much fun with alcohol, you know, my parents and family, friends and stuff. Just seemed to be that was what you do when you get older. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And any excuse to have a drink was you know, that was me. And I started a job in construction when I was 16, so I can really relate to what Steve was saying. You know, if there's a drop of rain, we're going to the pub, and after work to the pub, and I could drink some of the guys under the table. And for me, that was, I didn't know I was doing it. But that was just how I lived. I was one of the lads. And then there was a series of bereavements over the years, and I sort of stored those up in my emotional box, you know, and in my unconscious and everything. And before I knew it, 2004 was a big family bereavement, and that just sent me off the track, off the scale. And I was going to work, had a son in tow as well, but I was finishing work and ensuring that I had like 3 bottles of wine and a bottle of vodka, and getting up the next day and doing the school run and going back out. And, you know, so it was extremely chaotic. And it wasn't until I started to get really ill that I realized, oh dear, you know, I can't hide this anymore. This is a big problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So your body was telling you, kind of screaming at you. Yeah.
I looked 6 months pregnant. And I ended up with severe liver cirrhosis. And and more, but we won't go into that now. But yeah, it's mainly my body was sort of, I knew in my mind there was something wrong. And I always remember saying to myself, if you don't sort this out, you'll end up in a psychiatric hospital.
Yeah.
Back in 2012, I ended up in a rehab, which was a psychiatric hospital. And I remember seeing the sign, walking down the corridor going, oh my God, you're actually here. It's like you wish that on yourself,
Yeah, that's amazing. And like, do you find it, because we were talking before the show here, like I was talking about like being, like my father going through a difficult time and having had a liver transplant, but kind of like as a family member, kind of trying to look in and trying to get in touch with somebody that is in that kind of locked in a prison, where it's like as if you're locked in, they're locked into something, and then they can't get out and you can't get in. Did you feel like that you couldn't, like, because it sounds like there's a bit of awareness there, but you couldn't communicate it, or you're kind of like trapped within it such? Did you feel like that?
Yeah, I was in my own reality, and I tried so hard. I used to go to these groups, and try and get clean. And in these groups, they would teach you about addiction, and I knew it was a disease, and I knew it wasn't my fault. And I was trying to get out of it, but I knew I couldn't. And so I was also protecting myself, because I wanted to stay in it.
Yeah,
I wanted to stay in it. And so anything anybody was trying to help me with, they just couldn't get in.
Yeah. It's that prison kind of, isn't it? You know, it's like the mind creates this prison. Thanks so much for sharing all that, Kate. Like, you're really honest about everything that you went through. That's fantastic for people to hear. And Lisa, how about yourself? I think you're on mute there, Lisa.
The audio, some audio issues. My journey has been a little bit different with addiction. I have found myself on the other end of addiction. And so my first husband was an alcoholic. My second long-term partner was a recovered alcoholic. I have a very close friend now that is suffering from alcoholism, and he's had a very interesting journey with alcoholism. Mm-hmm. So, and like, I've been blessed to the last two relationships to actually have these people share everything with me, to feel safe enough with me to actually explain and show me the addiction in its process and how it works and I'm just like, wow, because I always used to try and figure it out. Like, I always, especially with my first husband, I was so naive with my first husband. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to offend anybody when I say this, but I really feel sometimes that the person that is in the relationship with the alcoholic is actually possibly even a sicker person. I know that I certainly was, because I had no reason to get well. You know what I mean? Like, I could point my finger at him and say, you're the one with the issue because you're drinking. But hey, I was the one that had some really freaking unhealthy relationship dynamics going on. But because it wasn't life or death for me, and I was, squeaky clean, and I wasn't drinking, it was his problem, right? So for me, I didn't actually get to see any of those relationships until I went into like my second long-term relationship. Because he was a recovered alcoholic, I went to a whole lot of AA meetings with him, and I actually sat in the rooms and listened, and I learned so much. It was an incredible experience for me to be able to hear people's stories, and also working with people's emotions, to be able to hear how the emotions underlie things. So my journey's been a little bit different. But I think, one thing that I've really come to know is that I did try to figure it out, and I used to think that I knew why people were addicts, because, it was emotional. Because your mind does that. Your mind wants to be able to put it into a box, right? Mm-hmm. But I actually I feel that every person is unique, and even in their addiction, they're unique. Mm-hmm. So I know addicts that are incredibly creative when they're, when they're drunk. They're so creative and everything is like comes through them when they're adjusted. So they don't want to be they don't want to be straight. They really love it because they're in their creative field, and that really goes against a lot of stories that we hear about addiction and how people, you know, I know there's a lot of shame, there's a whole lot of that sort of stuff, but I've actually come to this conclusion that, like life, alcoholism is an emerging process. And for every single person, they're in this process. And if I'm in a relationship, whether they're a friend or a partner, and they have an addiction, I'm actually in that process with them. And we're both in this emerging process. And for some reason, that's just where we are right now. And I'm learning and they're learning. And that sort of seems to me to be the best foundation for me to work with addiction. So yeah, it is baffling, and it's all of those things, because I don't think we can have a box of this is why it happens, because I just don't think it's like that.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, actually, what you're saying about the creative flow that comes when people drink. Because I know from being a creative person myself, and you know, from, you know, I suppose from our college upwards, like into professionalism, it doesn't really change that much, where like people tend to be, when they're very, very creative, they can go to drink and drugs to kind of get them into that flow state. So
it's almost like it's part of their personality, don't you think? Like it's almost like there's people that probably don't have that addictive side to their nature, and there's people that do. And the people that do, if it's channeled in the right way, they are the incredible minds on the planet. They are the people that have just created amazing things, right? But yeah. I do think it's like it's all that you've got it or you're not. Like, I think that sort of like it's an interesting, I don't know, that could be wrong, but I sort of look at that and think,
I think people who are very creative or people are usually very sensitive to environment and sensitive to people around them, sensitive to what's going on. So they're actually understanding and seeing things maybe more clearly, and they're affected by that more. But then they want to express that, and they can express that through different mediums and different places. But then also that causes them an awful lot of pain, because then they're feeling and they're understanding and they're knowing like what reality, the pain and suffering of life. So they're trying to numb that, you know, that kind of way with drink, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is, whatever. So it's kind of like, I would think that it's kind of people who are very sensitive, very intelligent, very creative, very, you know, people that are like that more so kind of because they're feeling everything, you know. And I think when you're numbing yourself, you kind of numb it. It's the subconscious has been numbed, so it's getting to the flow, because everybody is creative naturally. So it's just that when you kind of, when that gets numbed down, then with a substance, then you can freeze up the creativity, such, you know, that kind of way. But then again, people get addicted to it, then they find they can't do it without the substance, you know, that kind of way. And like we know all of it, rock stars and artists and people who are lost very early to like suicide and things like that, because the addiction has taken over, you know, like it's taken over completely, and then they end up, it's like it's a disease that it has control of their lives, you know, rather than them having control of it, you know. So it's really, it's interesting one when it comes to creativity and that. So thanks so much, Lisa. And Grania, I think you're on mute. We can't hear you. On mute. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Oh, the sound. You okay? Yeah. There's an echo.
That's a good echo.
Oh. Just give her a second. Technical difficulties, Houston. Gotcha.
I feel like I'm communicating from a different dimension. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you and we can see you. Well done. Woohoo! Welcome to Mental Health Warriors again. We got
Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
I can't hear you.
Oh God.
I can't hear you at all.
Oh God. Sorry, Grania.
Yeah, I can't hear you.
Okay. We go around again. Okay.
We need the picture through that device and the sound through the other one.
Yeah, I
They're
can't hear
both
you.
open.
I'd just be
God.
monologuing. I'm sorry.
Okay, Grania. Sorry about that. We'll have to sort it out.
Have you got some earphones, Grania?
Do you want to
Some
go on?
earphones
I can
might
listen
stop
in
the-
on my other device.
She can't hear anyway.
Okay, Steve, we can bring it back to you. Yeah, so like what do you think that kind of do you feel was you're trying to mask when it comes to the emotions behind, you know, what were like trying to get underneath the kind of skin of like the feeling that you want to use a substance as such, you know, to kind of.
I think it's freedom. A lot of it's freedom.
Yeah.
It is, because it allows you to let go of inhibitions. You become bulletproof. So you think, a bit like Lisa was saying with the creative. I can't even speak English now. Creative side, like that's when like alcohol's when I realize that I can dance and sing whether I can or not, but my creative side comes out. Like it's so many. I think it just allows you to be the real you that you're too afraid to show the world.
Okay. Yeah.
So it kind of lets you tap into that inner child a bit and let go of any of those inhibitions, and then you just start coming out of your shell, because all of a sudden that fear of judgment just lessens the further you get into it. So I think, there is a lot of freedom involved in the moment. It's only afterwards and like the following day when you lose that sense of freedom and go, oh no, that didn't feel right, or then you can get embarrassed because you go, well, that's not really me, even though it is really you.
Yes.
You feel like, oh, now people have seen a side of me that isn't me. Whereas if you could tap into that without the addiction around it, you'd probably have a really awesome life where you didn't have to be addicted to anything because you've just become you. The real you is there for the whole world to see without the shame and without the guilt. You're really owning who you want to be on the inside, because I think so many of us spend much of our formative years and early adulthood suppressing so much of who we really are internally that does lead us towards these other things and outcomes which aren't ideal. And I think once you can sort of really peel back those layers and go, no, that's who I want to be. Like it took me to at least 40 years old to not care what anyone thinks and to just go, this is me. Like I can never be loved by everyone. As crazy as that sounds, because it just God knows who wouldn't, but it can't happen. There's going to be people that rub the wrong way, and it's not everyone's cup of tea. And it took me a long time to accept that and go, I just got to rock out how I want to rock out and put me out there, and the people that resonate with it are going to gravitate to me, and I'm going to gravitate towards them. And it's allowed me to let go of so many other things. And I think not just addiction, but it lets go of so much other baggage that the addictions can kind of drift away gradually with it as well. Once you're a lot more comfortable in who you are and owning yourself and your personality and your beliefs and not trying to hide behind anything.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Do you mind if I jump in and ask a question?
Yeah, work away, Lisa.
So I think it's really interesting that you felt that when you were drinking that you felt more like you, and so you felt more free to be who you really are. So my question is, because I sort of feel that what I've observed is that when people get into relationship with a substance, that sort of replaces the relationship that they have with themselves. So the connection that they have to who they really are actually ceases to exist once they've got this other relationship going with the substance. So, which is sort of the opposite to what you said. But I was thinking to myself, perhaps what happens is when you first start to drink, that before the addiction really takes hold is when that feeling, you're still sort of in your body, you're still connected to yourself because you haven't really gone too far down that rabbit hole, would you say?
Spot on. Yeah, it's the relationship before it's a full-blown addiction.
Yeah.
And that's what sneakily leads you down the path to the addiction, I think, because, all those feelings. I mean, especially for me, like, obviously can't speak for everyone, but I'm an extremely kinesthetic person. I'm a feeler. I'm not really visual. I feel. So if what I'm doing is giving me that feeling, then I just latch onto it. And and I suppose we always look at things addictive wise as negatives, but I'm quite addictive in things that turn out positive as well. Like with work, I'm heavily addicted to getting things done and having them done in a certain way. And the guys at work are like, "This is crazy. Like, you just want to get stuff done." I'm like, "Yeah, I thrive on it. Like, I'm like a little junkie when it comes to seeing the boxes ticked in the right way." Trying to find those good things to become addicted to is really cool, because it does, like, you can only be addicted to so many things. So if you can slowly replace the negative ones with positive and then focus on them, sneakily the bad ones can just fall away, and you can keep redefining that new version of yourself and attach to that a bit more without any fear or. But yeah, I agree 100% with what you said there. It's the early stages where you develop this relationship with the addiction, and before it's fully taken hold, that's that feeling that I think compels you to keep repeating over and over and over again until it gets to a point where it's not really in your control, and it's just the mind just says, right, this is what we do, and the subconscious takes over, and you're into it. Just run amok and go for it. I haven't delved a heap into it. Like, even though I'm like with all my trainings and stuff, I obviously have a fair understanding, but it never been a focus of my coaching addiction. So I haven't dug deeper and deeper. It's more, things I've found through myself. And obviously now I'm at this stage, I'm quite an excited spectator. It's like I love my sports and watching people and how they navigate challenges. It's like another sport for me. So watching other people and trying to understand their motives and behaviors, I'm really getting into that as well, and trying to, without asking questions until I get to know them, just try to pinpoint little things like, I wonder if you do that because of that, or did this happen before? And then when you get to know them, then I can dig a bit deeper and find out heaps of stuff and go, I was totally wrong. Or,
there. I love that, Steve, actually, because from knowing you actually and us sitting in interviews, I really noticed that about you. You're such a big feeler. You feel everything. You've got the sixth sense. Like your information comes into your body, I think, more than anything. Like, isn't it? Like, it's kind of like you pick up on things, like, it's interesting that, like, I suppose then it kind of feeds into what I'm saying about the creative people who have that ability to feel, and it's kind of like, then it comes to self-awareness. When you know that about yourself, that you tend to, like, we all want to gravitate to things that make us feel good, so, you know what I mean? We're going to, but it's like when you realize then, okay, this makes me feel good, but it's not good for me because it's going to take hold of me, or it's going to ruin my health. But where can I get, where can I actually put my strengths, that addictive nature, into something positive, like, which is, or and trying to keep that balance as well, because, like, even for myself as well, like, I went into work kind of, and I just was like, kind of nearly, I kind of could say like I was maybe a workaholic when I was in my 20s, because I just so creative and so, like, really thriving in challenge, that kind of way. When you were challenged, I always thrive when I'm in challenge. But then, like that, you have to kind of keep a balance, because that can tip over into then no self-care, and it's like a drive thing, But I think what you're saying about when you started to notice yourself when you're going through, difficulty with your dad or whatever, and you're noticing the pattern still there, I think it's always really that self-awareness to bring yourself back and say, oh, is this pattern starting again, but just in a different way, in a different form? Like, it's so important to have that self-awareness, isn't it?
Mm.
It is, because I think, like, even if you realistically conquer an addiction, like, it's like they say, there is no such thing as an ex-smoker. If you've smoked for a long period of time, you're a smoker for life, but you're choosing not to. And I think it's the same with alcohol and many other things. Like, once your mind and body have become accustomed for so many years to something, it's there. So if you eliminate the awareness around it, you're going to just go backwards. Like, you can slip into anything. Like, you could not smoke for 25 years, have one, and be straight back into a pack a day. So it's like you've got to have that mental awareness around what you're doing to go, uh-oh, warning sign, like, here we go, like, back off. And it's not easy. It's
and sometimes I like that.
It
Takes yourself a little bit of time to realize you're back in the pattern, you know, like, and then go, oh, gee, and then I have to pull myself back again, you know, that kind of way. It takes that, doesn't it, sometimes, because it creeps up on you, you know, without you realizing,
sneaky.
you know.
Really sneaky.
Very sneaky. It's clever, very clever. How about you, Kate? How about you? And like your self-awareness really around how you know, why you drank and your patterns and behaviors and your emotional triggers and stuff like that. Looking back now, how do you feel, you know, you kind of came through that? You understand?
It takes a while. It takes a while, you know, it did with me, but with the right lifestyle and then sort of like the right training in life, you know, we think when we're addicts, we've got all these life skills. Yeah, we've got some, but they're the skills, those skills aren't needed in recovery. So, you know, not all of them anyway. It's like when you're on this recovery journey, you have to be like open ears all the time and learning from people that have been on the journey for longer. And that self-awareness is like something that we build into ourselves, you know, and we're just constantly on it. You know, you can end up getting your shopping, and when you get to the till, you're looking at the where, you know, the counter, and you've got like 6 bars of chocolate. You're like, hey, hang on a minute, what's going on here? Or you've got 4 bottles of non-alcoholic rosé wine. You're like, what is the point in that? You know, there's all these little things. So that, and then even the way I speak, sometimes I can see that there's something chaotic going on with me. So I need to sit back and chill out and relax and start working on myself again. So this awareness is quite big. But the things that I thought would trigger me most, you know, like big issues in life and stresses and stuff, they're not so bad. It's the addiction that sort of slimes its way in, it sneaks its way in, like Steve said, you know, and you have to be fully aware all the time.
Yeah.
And is that an emotion, right? Is that where feelings come in? Because if you're aware of your feelings, like if we as a culture became more into the way we felt and were more aware of the feelings that were coming up in us each moment, would that help catch that, do you think? Like, do you think that sometimes we have these feelings that we're not quite aware of?
Yeah.
And then that can lead us to that place. Like, maybe that's where emotion fits in so nicely to this whole story that we're talking about.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah. I think we need to keep a check on our emotions. We need that little self-care bundle, you know, where we do maybe 3 things for ourselves every single day, and we reflect on what's worked that day, what hasn't, what's going on, how am I feeling, you know, maybe journal. I know a lot of people like to journal. I verbalize things a lot more than journaling, but yeah, I really think that is the case. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
and you want to feel free in it too, don't you? Like, you want to feel, I should imagine that you'd want to feel not like you have to really hold on for the rest. Like, you'd want to be feeling like you're enjoying your life and you know, like you want to be clear in that place. You know, what I've observed is, I think it's that the choice that people make, that so it's almost like they're aware, and there's a place where the leverage of staying sober is just not quite as great as the leverage of going down that pathway. So that has a lot to do with will and our our disciplined will. And I think our disciplined will is very connected to how well we know ourselves emotionally. I've noticed anyway, for me, my will is a lot more powerful when I understand myself emotionally.
I think we really need to educate ourselves if we're not already educated on that sort of stuff, you know. And we need to be always searching and always learning to improve ourselves, you know. And so many people out there are sat in their homes and they don't talk to anybody, and they're not learning anything new. They're so stuck and so isolated. We need to get the message out there that, you know, there are people out there who can listen and can support you and teach you new things, which will make your life so much easier.
Yeah, I think isolation is a big thing for all mental health issues, isn't it? You know, like when you're feeling isolated, it's maybe a reason why people, it's just, you know, I have that become addicted to a relationship with a substance as such, you know, because it's like they have a relationship with something, you know. It might be
it becomes your best friend, you know. Cocaine also was my best friend for a while.
Okay.
As well as the alcohol, and that was the worst relationship I ever had. I think you know.
Yeah. The kind of turbulent relationship, was it?
Absolutely. It had so many ups and downs. It was ridiculous. You've got to find some humor in it when you look back. Yeah, you've got to find the humor in it. It's not funny, but you know. It's
not funny, but that's a bit of dark humor. Sorry, I was bringing
yeah.
My dad taught me that. I think that's got him through 30 years of psychiatric nursing. You find the light in every situation. Gráinne, I don't know if Gráinne can hear us. Gráinne,
I can hear you. I'm not too sure if you can hear me.
Yes, perfect. We can hear you, and we have your picture. So you go ahead. If you'd like to give some or input into, like, Gráinne has worked with addiction services in Ireland, and you know, your understanding around kind of awareness and with addiction with the clients, and also I know you have life experience with your parents in addiction. Do you want to share something?
Yeah, I suppose I was brought up in a. Both my parents were drinkers, so they were alcoholics. But it was really, I suppose, the squeaky wheel was my mother. She was the one that got all the attention. She was the problem, though. My father would have had codependency and had alcohol issues of his own. But obviously he worked full time, so he looked fantastic. But it is, as Lisa was saying, that you really emerge in a recovery process with them. And I suppose how that manifested for me in my 20s, as my mother started to get well, I started to drink. And as Steve highlighted, I went to Australia for a year, and I really think if I stayed any longer, it would have been a dark hole I ended up in, because gambling and drinking just went hand in hand, you know.
Australians and drinking, it's like, oh.
Yeah, it was way, way, way too easy. And obviously my parents just started their recovery, and they were racked with guilt. So anytime I ran out of money, they were sending me over money. So I was flooded in Australia. So I came back with more problems than I left with. And everybody going to Australia from Ireland to find themselves, I got even more lost than I already was. And I think with that comes more issues. It's not just, you know, the drink or the gambling, or as Kate said, the cocaine. It's all the things that happen then. Like, so all the sexual assaults, or all the people you hurt, or the selfishness that comes with that, that you're then running away from as well. So in a karmic or cathartic way, I ended up working in addiction services years later. And I suppose what's interesting about Ireland and how we approach hazardous use and addiction is it's completely separate to our mental health services, and it's just becoming an increasing problem. In other countries, mental health services, addiction is seen as a mental health issue. In Ireland, it's not. So if you present with any kind of substance misuse in hospital or psych services at all, your depression, anxiety, suicide ideation, self-harm, bipolar is not addressed. It can't be. And so they have to leave and get clean, and then they'll deal with the mental health issue. Now it's improving now, but it really just keeps people on this puppet string, having to stabilize or detox alone, really, to deal with significant mental health issues. So there isn't the wraparound supports. I think it's really interesting what Lisa's saying about the role of the family, because as families have such a significant position as the scaffolding for the person in recovery, or as the trigger for all their pain. You know, it can be everything and nothing at the same time. Yet I suppose I do pieces of work with families, and as Lisa's saying, like, they have to have their own individual recovery. But I think one of the best things that I learned about myself and working with people in addiction, and such a privilege to do so, is that so the piece that attracted me to working in addiction services, what they were really viewed as the scum of society. Just whatever other issue there was, addiction was always their fault. So at a societal level, I think they're viewed as, well, it's really their own fault. Look at everything they're doing. They're destroying themselves. They're destroying their family. They're a scourge on society. It's, and everything that happens, sure, they're to blame for it anyways. And can they not just give it up? And, and parents with substance misuse. Now, I think we've really turned a corner, particularly in services here in Ireland in the last 10 years. But anyways, that's what attracted me, was that they were just regarded as the worst in society. And my ego in me just wanted to help. I'm like, oh, they're the worst, then that's who I need to be helping. That was all my ego driven. But it was such a karmic profession and learning for me to go, okay, in people's huge vulnerability and inability to help themselves, because addiction is a cycle. Like once you're in, it's not this conscious choice, like physiologically, behaviorally, neurologically, socially, there's so many different variables keeping the person in that dysfunction. And and in Ireland, I suppose 20 years ago when I started in addiction, it was all about, reducing antisocial behavior, and then it was a bit so, because obviously, they were the worst of society and they were damaging everybody and stealing and everything, right? So 20 years ago, it was about, right, well, let's work with them to kind of stop the antisocial behavior. And then it moved on a bit to, okay, well, let's work with them a bit to reduce the harm they do to themselves and others. And I was really grateful, I suppose, to be involved and support to the people who advocated, the people in addiction who advocated that recovery is possible. And they really had to fight. They really had to fight and demonstrate and be, better than everybody to say, this is what it's like in recovery. And people do, because it was such a hopeless place for so many people in addiction. If those advocates hadn't stepped forward and created a whole movement around recovery, like Kate's page, like what Steve does, like people don't see it. It's like people were recovering and then disappearing, and the shame been in addiction or employment or anything like that they couldn't say anything about their addiction, to the point at a service level it was like, okay, well, if you've been in addiction, you can't transfer your stuff. You're here as an employee, so you can't tell the clients that you're in addiction. The clients would respect you all the more, and then be all the more empowered and build their self-esteem. Oh my God, you understand me, because actually you haven't been through it, you don't really understand. Of course, the circumstances are different, but that level of understanding is a huge foundation for people. So what I learned then was the power and the vulnerability of people advocating their recovery, but also that recovery process. So my business now is all actually based on we all in the world need to go into a recovery process, and
Yes.
that's dive self-awareness and decrypt the fragments of ourselves
Yeah.
that people in addiction are forced to do. Like they force themselves ultimately to do it. Obviously, it's personal. But that model of recovery that we have from addiction and in mental health, it should be applied to everybody. There's so many people who are like, oh, well, they're the ones with the problem, not me.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. That's so brilliant, Grania. Thank you so much for sharing like your whole arc of experience and depth of knowledge, like both, you know, professionally and experientially with your family and yourself and everything. And like to get to that deep understanding that it all comes back to each person. And that I really feel like, you know, with the mental health warriors as well, breaking the stigma of mental health is all about that kind of opening them up, each person, you know, in our vulnerability, and all of us coming into that awareness, that self-awareness of the fact that we all are susceptible to it. But to I suppose it's all about, to me, like stigma is about denial of the truth, you know, of our shared vulnerability of just being human, you know. And it's amazing to hear, like what you said. I totally resonate with what you said about, you know, the stigma around addiction, because even within my family as well, like I remember my dad was going through his difficult days, like family members even saying to me, but sure, like he's doing it to himself, you know, like there was no, you know, there was no sympathy, you know, for anyone, that you couldn't even, we were silenced, like when you started, you couldn't even mention, like you can't even mention their name, because it was like a red flag to everybody, you know. They didn't even know somebody existed, you know, because it was like, you know, a black mark on the family, and you know, that kind of way. It's just so, it just talk about isolation. It puts people into isolation, into themselves, their family. It's like you're an outcast, you know. And it's not until people start to open up and talk about, you know. And I suppose like then it's funny, because really that's just a reaction to something maybe that's uncovered and not being seen in their own family, you know, that they don't want it to be uncovered, you know. And because I do find that within my family, like all the things that come up been difficult, but with such a lovely, loving, warm, open family because of that, you know, because everything's out in the open, like, you know. And I also think that people that I know are kind of suffer from, families that I know suffer from hiding things, hiding issues.
Well, the family automatically does have the courtesy stigma and all the hidden harms and the ripple effect, but all the shame. They don't want people to know that somebody in their family has an addiction, because ultimately, I think deep down it's this reflection of, well, they don't love me, whether it's a parent or a parent of the addicts. Like, what did I do wrong? And they're stuck in not being able to forgive themselves that this person is stuck in addiction because of something somewhere along the way that they did.
It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, I found almost a referred guilt and shame since I've gotten better, and I share the hell out of my journey and my story. I know my wife, she's like, you're embarrassing the hell out of us. How can you tell people that all the stuff you did? And I said, because I don't care. I promise when I talk that if anyone asks me something, I'm going to be honest and tell them every single sordid detail.
Yeah.
Because if I hold stuff back, how am I helping anybody? How am I going to stop the next little Steve growing up being a clown like I was, unless I strip back everything and say, I did this, I did that? I said, you've got nothing to be embarrassed about. I said, be embarrassed if I hide and I'm not vulnerable and raw and real. I said, that's embarrassing.
Yeah.
I said, owning past failures and showing that you're trying to move in a positive forward direction, I said, that's not embarrassing. I said, if you find anyone that's judgmental or going to throw stones at that, you don't need them in your life. They're toxic. They're the ones with the problem, not the person that's sharing things they've been through. That, like, people have to let go of feeling bad about what's happened in their past if they're trying to do everything in their powers to move in the right direction now. There should never be any sort of embarrassment about things you've done. I mean, obviously, yeah, like if I'd gone and killed people while I was drunk, I probably shouldn't be sharing it, and there should still be some shame and embarrassment there. But I didn't hurt anyone apart from myself. And if I can talk about it and help one person, brilliant. I'm not going to stop. No one can shut me up. And I'm on a roll. I'm just going to keep sharing and telling everyone about anything I've done, just in the hope that one person's going to go, I needed to hear that. I can make a difference now in my life. And that's all that matters. Don't have to worry about what anyone else thinks.
Yeah. How do you feel about that, Kate?
I'm the same. I don't care what anyone else thinks. I openly share, and it does help a lot of people. And you know, it's funny. I was talking to a client last night, and he said, I really feel since I've been having the sessions with you that you get me, you understand, because you've been there and you're so open with it that I'm picking up this, you know, I'm picking up this. It's okay for me to be this person.
Yeah.
You know, so that's just what makes it so worthwhile being open, honest, and willing, you know.
Yeah. I've watched the greatest healings from that, just being with a person, you know, addiction or whatever, just being there with them and actually being emotionally present and having no requirements of them at all, having nothing that they need to be, just totally allowing them to be the addict in front of you, how they're turning up, because that safe place allows them then to process what they need to process. Because you think about it, there would be so few opportunities for them to be held in that space, because most people are trying to, you know, move them one way or the other, or resisting it or changing it, you know, like, but it's that validation and that real emotional presence that, and you sort of think, is that all I have to do, right? Because you think we're taught that we've got to do things, but actually that is the most powerful thing you can ever do for another human being.
Yeah. Absolutely, because it has to come from within change. You know, you can't change, you can't, you know, lecture somebody, or you can't, you know, even giving services, or, you know, it has to be that moment when somebody just switches and they just turn and say, no, I'm changing. You know, whatever process that goes on internally, it's an internal job, isn't it? You know,
Absolutely.
You have to get to that point. But I do think that, to me as well, it's a process. But for me, it's like it's an evolutionary process of self-discovery. So it's like sometimes the best place to be is at rock bottom, because, you know, that's like the gateway to yourself. You know, you realize, and you have the chance at that moment to really wake up to who you truly are, you know, and like it's the kind of seat of power then, like, you know, and we always talk about that, Steve, you know, isn't it, like, you know, the power hour of mindfulness, and that it's like when you can kind of gather yourself and decide whatever it is, like whatever stage or transition period you're in life, that in those points, like you can just say, okay, I have a choice now, you know, and when choice comes in, then you start to feel that power coming, and you can change it then, you know, but it has to come from within, doesn't it?
Always. Everything comes from within. And I think, like, to be honest, I think that was my big breakthrough. Once, because I'm a feeler, once I started communicating and making decisions from a heart-centered space and kicked that ego out, and I wasn't making thought decisions, they were heart decisions, then it's easy. It was so much easier for me to move away from addiction, because it wasn't even the subconscious taking over. I only let the feelings come through that were coming from a point where I wanted them to, that allowed me to go, right, this is good for me. This is what lights me up. This is what I enjoy. Let's get addicted to that stuff, because that makes me feel really, and then the next day I feel awesome. Not like the bad. The next day I feel like rubbish. I'm doing this stuff, and because it's coming from the heart, my heart's swelling, and it makes me want to do more and more things. Like, it just totally flipped the script for me, moving away from ego and coming from a totally different space. It made eliminating a lot of the bad things so much easier in a weird way that I wasn't even understanding at the time. It's only reflection now that I can sort of see how things turned and by being totally working from the inside out.
It's like it naturally falls away. It's like, as I was saying, like it's like the sun within. I definitely were talking about last night, like the sun within. So I think like the heat, you bring that feeling experience into your body, and then it starts to kind of grow, you know, from outside. And then you realize then the exterior things, they start to fall away because you don't need them as much. It's all coming from this beautiful place within yourself. And it seems to, like, it just has its own growth. It's like an organic thing that starts to kind of grow, and you gravitate then towards like people then that have that feeling as well. Like there's a resonance then, isn't it? You kind of like a resonance body of kind of like all these cells going into one area that you're all being drawn to, you know, like it's amazing. So like that kind of experiential, because like you're talking about your feeling everything, then you would have really benefited hugely from that heart-centered feeling, because you're going to feel that probably more than most people because you have the ability to feel, you know. So it's like, you know, your recovery is like, you know, that's why, you know, I suppose you get so much back from that, you know. It's like it has such a huge effect on you, and it has had such a transformational effect on you, you know, coming back to the heart center and that kind of warm feeling, and kind of keeping that as your kind of home, I guess, you know, and that as your relationship, maybe transferring from the addictive relationship with an alcohol or whatever to the relationship with yourself, you know, that kind of self-love and self-acceptance. And and
then it's just translated into how I work with my clients now when I'm coaching. I just come from the exact same space that I did to work on myself. Now it just goes the opposite direction with, like everyone said, just being present and holding that space and making people know that there is no judgment with me. Everything's coming from the inside, and I'll be projecting that love through every single conversation I have. And if that can help put people at ease, I think it just works miracles sometimes, and getting people to open up way beyond how they would have in any other space. If they've just got a counsellor who's textbook trained, a lot like Grania said, with like lived experience smashes textbook experience, in my opinion. Like you're just so much more relatable, and people are going to open up so much more freely when they think, this is just someone that did a lot of years of uni that's just going to tell me what to do, as opposed to someone they've been in the trenches, they've lived this crap, and they're listening to me intently and care. You can feel like I've had clients that are great friends in the long run, because you develop that bond of working through the same things together, and it just makes things. It's a beautiful space to be in.
That's gorgeous. Thanks, Steve. That's so lovely. It's such a different feeling, isn't it? Like to that kind of, you know, even like Grania, like you were talking about nearly the coldness of the kind of services, you know, that are.
Well, I can't say that.
Yeah.
Like I work with the services, and
but what I mean is like, as in when you're saying about,
I think in the past,
people can't open up to their life experience, or is that something that, you know, like as in when they're in counselling or they're a counsellor and they've had that life experience, that you would love to think that they could share those life experiences with our clients, I guess, you know.
And some services do, like a lot of the services that I would refer to, they would be managed by somebody who is both qualified and has the personal experience as well, and that's a beautiful blend, you know, because that they have all the skill set, really. So I think that's changed in Ireland in the last few years, but it really does depend on management, and it does as well depend on the person, because as Steve highlighted and Kate highlighted, that there's people who have come through addiction that it isn't integrated. It is, that's who I was, but this is who I am now. So they really have rejected that part of themselves, or they are separate to that now. And they could be like so many people, I don't know if you get this, who come through addiction. And in Ireland anyways, you know, you're trying to map kind of life plans moving forward. And so many were like, well, I want to be a counsellor. And I was like, oh my God, and we are flooded with counsellors in Ireland, you know, and coaching definitely is the way to go. Counselling is a separate piece, but everybody thinks that in Ireland it's the way. Counselling is everything for mental health, everything for addiction, but actually coaching is the behavioural piece and the mindset piece. And the life blueprint piece that people need and will hold them. And definitely there's room for psychotherapeutic interventions. If there's different pieces that we have as blocks, for example, that we might need to dig a little deeper on. But definitely that integration. And I do think that you see people who maybe have experienced addiction in different forms. It could be family members, particularly, that they're working with people from a place of judgment. They're working with people from a place of ego. They're trying to fix their client because they're not really fixing themselves, you know. So we still have that. Yeah.
I noticed that, Grania, as well, that even just talking through the mental health warriors and having these lovely relationships with the other warriors, and noticing that there seems to be a lot more coaching is a big thing in Australia, where in Ireland that's not something now that I would be. It's not as prevalent here, is it? You know, it's more psychotherapy, isn't it? And
all psychotherapy, yeah. So in Ireland, we love quality frameworks, and we love standardized systems, and counselling has one. So you have like the Irish network, the Irish Association of Counsellors and Psychotherapists, and then you have one for addiction counselling as well. Now, there's absolute merit in that, because the likes of coaches or stuff now in Ireland, like anybody can say, oh, I'm this. And there's really no safeguarding for clients. And that's how that happened. You know, people were saying they were counsellors after no qualifications or a 12-week course, and they're seeing people. But my view is that if we educate people to trust their gut and who they're working with, then, you know, because at the same time, we lose out on a lot. We lose out on all that experience and people who are just naturally brilliant at holding a safe space for somebody. If they don't have the qualification. In Ireland, you absolutely have to have a qualification, and you have to tie into a bigger framework.
Yeah, that's a brilliant. That's a really, really key kind of point, because like that, it's getting back to the kind of experiential presence of a person. Like, what do they bring to you when you're sitting with them? Like, you know, their ability to listen and to be kind of, that safe space that maybe it doesn't come with qualifications. It comes with an aptitude or life experience or whatever, you know. And like, so maybe it's an opening in Ireland then for, you know, coaching. Because I love the idea of that, even that, just because there's such an association with stigma when it comes to going for, you know, therapy or, you know, psychotherapy or whatever, that if when people to look at it like getting coached, life coaching in a certain area around addiction, to me, it's a lot more proactive sounding, you know, and a lot more integrated with community, a lot more in life, you know, rather than separate to, like I was saying about that separateness that you feel like outside of society. It's more in, you know, like kind of inaction, life in action, because it's not like life stops, that you're separate. That's a mind thing, you know, that people, like, everyone is part of society, you know, regardless of this stigma that is it, you know, is in people's minds as such. Like, so I love the idea that, you know, coaching is another maybe opening for an avenue for people in Ireland. So come on, guys, over to Ireland, give some.
I can recommend an absolutely amazing coach in Ireland. She is phenomenal, has been doing it for a number of years, Yvonne Doherty. So if any of our Irish viewers are looking for a coach and very, very good around addiction. She's come from a similar space to a lot of us in her early years. She's still young now, but yeah, she is phenomenal. So yeah, any of our Irish viewers, Yvonne Doherty, I can give you details later on if anyone's interested. But there is at least one sensational coach in Ireland
Excellent.
that I know.
Just one.
Well, it's a global village now, so we can have coaches from all over. So yeah, and we have actually Dr. Jennifer Hawkins is on. Hi, Jennifer, she's from LinkedIn, listening to us, and she's really impressed with everybody's comments and talking about emotions, and she thinks we're really spot on there. That's fantastic, Jennifer. She's actually, I was speaking to Jennifer during the week, and she has written a fabulous book around, the academics nearly of emotion, and I suppose that's what she's really interested to listen to all the experience everybody's had around addiction. So delighted to have you listening in, and Adam and Claire and Melissa was on earlier on. I don't know if she's still listening to us. Yeah. So thank you everyone so much. We're actually over the hour, but it was such a rich conversation. I'm so delighted we eventually got Grania on, because she's just like,
Yes.
I call Grania the fountain of knowledge. Like, she's just so much knowledge. You could we'd have to have you on
No
again.
knowledge how to work a computer, though.
Listen, we're all the same. We're all the same. That's our generation, We get there in the end, Thanks so much, Steve, for taking time out to, come on and chat. Like, your experience and your journey is just priceless to everybody and the listeners. And thank you so much for always being so open and vulnerable, because it's actually, that's the true superpower, isn't it? Like, it is definitely. And I think from myself and feedback I've got from people as well, it's always, that's when people, it's like giving them it really connects. That's how you can connect to people, and that's how people build trust with people, and that's what gives people a chance to validate their own emotions, So it's really brilliant, And Kate, thank you so much, and it's just been amazing to meet you. And we've just got a taste of your experience and your life journey, and definitely want to have you on again. I want to have to come on Words is Medicine, talk to me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll pinch her for Power Hour as well.
Yeah.
Everyone can come on with me too.
Yeah, we'll have you on again. And Lisa, thanks so much again, Lisa, for coming on with your life experience and your emotional expertise in that world. And Grania, thanks so much. And we'll do it again, guys, and have another panel discussion. And it seems like a good team here to unpack things. Okay. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Carolyn.
Bye.
I'm on later on, actually, at 8 o'clock with Kerry Barr. So see you then. Bye.
Oh, yes.
Bye.
Really awesome.
Bye.